Right, we got a conclusion to this, folks, and the result is underwhelming, or at least mildly underwhelming. So, you don't need me to tell you that Lance Stroll has gotten himself in a little bit of hot water recently on the grounds of shoving around his personal trainer, Henry Howe. I won't bore you with the details too much, since you probably already know, but if you don't, you can watch these two videos right here to get clued up about the entire situation which arose last week. And it's only now that we're actually getting a resolution, when all of this could have been perfectly avoided had Aston Martin just written a proper statement on the day saying that Lance Stroll had apologized to the personal trainer, and then that would have been that. But no, we just had this story running and running and running and running for as long as it has, and it's just manifested itself into an even bigger beast than it necessarily should have been. I mean, even the whole thing with Ocon and Verstappen shoving around, that got resolved within a day because there was an actual proper conclusion and there were apologies. But either way, let me tell you what the FIA compliance officer has actually said based on what we found out from Planet F1. We can confirm that the FIA compliance officer has received an apology from Lance Stroll regarding his actions during the 2023 FIA Formula 1 Qatar Grand Prix. The compliance officer has noted this apology and issued a written warning, reminding Lance of his responsibility as a competitor bound by the FIA Code of Ethics and other FIA ethical and conduct guidelines set forth by the sporting regulations. The FIA maintains a zero-tolerance stance against misconduct and condemns any actions that may lead to physical harassment. So what that translates to is that Lance Stroll was a little bit of a naughty boy, has a slap on the wrist, and then basically gets a warning on paper that you better not do that again or else we'll be very cross. But at the very least, what we have actually got is a written apology of some sort from Lance Stroll. We don't know the actual machinations and the contents of that apology, but it's probably a damn sight better than what he said on Sunday by going, nah, we're good, he's a bro. You didn't really have the other side of the situation with Henry Howe and how he was feeling. No pun intended there, but you just feel like, okay, at least there was some accountability, because quite frankly, the most galling part of all of this was that there was no accountability from Aston Martin. Throughout the entire season, what we have seen from the team is them trying to downplay every single flaw and issue and problem that Lance Stroll finds himself in. Whether or not it's the fact that, actually, as I pointed out on Twitter, that in one weekend, McLaren scored just as many points as Lance Stroll has in a single season. That is something very galling when you are fighting for fourth place in the Constructors, and McLaren are steaming up right behind you, has scored nearly double the points that you scored in the last 3 races. This is oh dear. That's a little bit awkward. But either way, the whole thing is that it has been resolved. And I'm like, okay, all right. I will give credit to Lance that he actually took this seriously and provided some kind of an apology, a formal one, to the FIA governing body, and that now this can be finally drawn a line under. That's why I'm making this video, as it's now become a little bit of a trilogy, and followed by quite a lot of people, so I'm guessing that you've now got yourself a conclusion here. But what does this mean now going into the future? What are all other drivers going to be doing? Now that really, Lance Stroll, all he got away with was some kind of written warning, and we don't really know the contents of the warning. But it is kind of interesting to think that the conclusion was that Lance Stroll was actually guilty of physical harassment, which makes a lot of sense. When you get to the Ocon Verstappen incident, that is sort of different because he was provoked by Esteban Ocon saying, "Hey bro, I was faster than you," whilst trying to unlap himself whilst Verstappen was heading toward the victory that year. I mean, he got the victory the following year, but that year he was so close to getting it, and Max absolutely snapped. And yes, that really is not something he really should have done, especially when there are cameras around and people will be looking. There were plenty of witnesses in there, other drivers to boot, but he did get punished very quickly, and he got 2 days of community service, he served them, and then everything was done. It was resolved very, very quickly. Whereas this incident kind of tells me what the situation at Aston Martin is right now, that it's a culture where things are hopefully swept under the rug and things are not meant to escalate. But unfortunately, because the media got ahead of it, Aston Martin kept quiet, and therefore that silence was very deafening, and everybody else tried to piece together what was happening, and therefore it became an absolute behemoth of a story, when otherwise it shouldn't have been, had there been an actual apology from Lance Stroll or Aston Martin a couple of hours later, or even just the next morning. It was then just turned into this behemoth of a thing where the governing body of Formula One had to step in and do something, or else it would look like Lance Stroll would have gotten away scot-free. And that is something that really shouldn't happen. You should not be pushing around people or shoving people, because that is just intimidation. And that just makes people feel really small and kind of fearful. And it's actually kind of telling, because when I look back at that footage, nobody really noticed. They just got on with their work, and it was like, is this the norm? What else has he done? I mean, we don't know, and I can't really say, but it's just something to think about. But at least there was some kind of apology. It probably would have been worse if the FIA compliance officer actually came to the conclusion that, oh, we don't really see any reason for Lance Stroll to apologize. We just realized that it was the heat of the moment and that everything was fine. No, we at least got some kind of admittance that there was physical harassment involved, and that Lance Stroll did actually step up and provide an apology of sorts, because there has to be some sort of accountability here. And hopefully this kind of situation won't happen again, and that Lance Stroll will be reminded that he is setting an example to young drivers and young people. Especially, you get the F1 Kids broadcast being made. You probably might get more of them next year, and they've been really, really good. We'll probably get more young people watching Formula One with those more accessible types of coverage and content. So the last thing that you really want to have is a driver who's going to fly off the handle where the cameras are around and setting a bad example. That it's acceptable to push staff around. It's not, but at the very least, I am glad that there has been a resolution. That's pretty much where we can draw the line right now and get on with looking forward to the next race in Austin. And hopefully Lance Stroll can actually get out of Q1, hopefully. I mean, he stands a good chance. I think he's actually done quite well at Austin. I want to give credit where credit is due for Lance Stroll when he does something good, and okay, I will give him credit for this because he actually went along with the investigation. This could have gone on for days and days and days with absolutely nothing, but this was resolved pretty quickly, within a couple of days in fact. So I'm actually kind of relieved about this, and I feel like actually it gives me some hope that, you know, this won't happen again. But I think it's needless to say that Lance Stroll's situation right now is pretty dire, in that he is being harangued by all of this, and this entire incident has really not helped the situation. That this should have just been resolved very quickly, and the worst that would have actually come out of all of this is like, wow, he sure was grumpy at the end of Q1, and then that would have been that. People would have just forgotten about it, because he has given relatively short interviews, but this one was really short. Kimi Räikkönen would be proud of him. I mean, I don't think he would really cuss, but either way, it was quite brief. In fact, I think he'd have actually outdone Kimi Räikkönen, the world champion of short interviews. But, okay, right. I'm just relieved. It's all over and done with. We can now move on to the next race, and you can find out why the FIA is actually being a little bit cheeky with its plans to try and derail Formula One and their plans to block Andretti. It's quite fun.